Joshua Warren had a great line, which is, "It is a mistake to understand new things too quickly. We often do not understand them and get them very, very wrong."
It's not only about the AI superpower countries. It's not even about the elites, the privileged people. It's about everyone. It's all of those ordinary people who might gonna live and suffer from this huge change of time.
Before you can make something either an aspiration or a goal, you first have to be able to conceive of it. And I think that's why storytelling is so vital.
Help people to understand what's the technology and what's behind the technology. Never want to compete with AI with all this accuracy of calculation. I think that's not what humans are good at. So we have to look back in our humanity. What's the real advantage of human parts?
We're going from a period of mass production to mass customization.
So I think we need a paradigm shift, not only on technology, but also on the mindset, on the consciousness.
Well, hello everyone. It's Jim O'Shaughnessy with yet another Infinite Loops. I have been waiting to talk to today's guest, author Qiufan, author of one of my favorite books that I recommend all the time for people trying to get a handle on what is going on with artificial intelligence. The name of the book is AI 2041, 10 Visions of Our Future. And you've said, Qiufan, that by imagining our future through science fiction, we can step actively in and shape it. I could not agree more completely. I think that we humans run on stories, and I think yours are great. Welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me to Infinite Loop. I couldn't be more excited to share with you some of my ideas and of course have a deeper conversation on AI and what's going on right now.
So I became actively involved in AI when I invested in and became chairman of Stability AI. And boy, what a learning curve. The reason
Totally.
the reason that I love your book is that it really inserts the human element of storytelling. And you're such a great writer. You've won numerous awards for your writing. Um, Tell me, have you been absolutely fascinated by science fiction in all of its forms for all of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a sci-fi fan since kid. So I think back in the kindergarten time, around the age I started to read um, Arthur C. Clarke's Asimov, and even more ancient time classic writers like H.G. Wells and Jules Verne. And because my dad, he used to work in the ultrasonic research institute, so they have a huge library full of all this kind of books, popular science and technology books and the manuals, that kind of things. And he brought me to the library from time to time. So I found some books with science fiction out there. And I'm totally dig into that world. And it's so fascinating. And I just love it. And it became my thing.
I am also a huge science fiction nerd. You mentioned Isaac Asimov, and he said something that I thought was really interesting that I'd like your opinion on. He said that basically it takes 60 years from the discovery of something until we see it in practical use. So you note in the beginning of your book that John McCarthy coined the term artificial intelligence in 1956, and wonder of wonders, 2016, things start to really heat up.
Yep.
Would you mark the kind of third wave of AI as beginning around 2016, 2017?
I'm not quite sure it was like third wave or fourth wave because there were so many ups and downs back in the time, right? So I think, yeah, as amorous law, but it as like we human beings, we always, have wrong assumption on new technology. We intended to overestimate the impact in the short term period of time, but we underestimate the long term influence of the new technology. So that's what humans being always do. So I think on AI, for example, back in the 50s, 70s, 80s, all those expert scientists, they have speculation that AI might gonna emerge some kind of like general intelligence can compare with human beings in like 5 to 8 years. But all of those guess went wrong. So basically, we are heading to another direction, like neural network. Back in the day, nobody think it really works, but somehow it works, right? So it's kind of all this kind of thing reminds me all this unpredictable and uncertainty of technology. It might have its own life cycle, and sometimes it's quite random. And because I think of the technology we're using on vehicle, on cars, right? Back in the day, we have electricity cars. We have like um, the steam engine and the imbusted engine, that kind of things. But somehow we pick up the most difficult one, most unstable one, because of Texas discovery, a lot of like gas, a lot of oil under the ground. So the capital, the society, pick another alternative path towards the future. So that's always reminds me in science fiction, we always make wrong prediction about the future as well.
Yeah, and path dependencies are so important. The point about electric versus the discovery of oil and gas, and then moving that way. Joshua Warren had a great line, which is, "It is a mistake to understand new things too quickly. We often do not understand them and get them very, very wrong." That's one of the reasons why I love your book, because what you're really doing is offering 10 visions exactly, right? Of potential outcomes. And we always want to add the caveat that, when movies became popular, they didn't know what to do with it, right? They thought, well, maybe we should film plays, right? Because that's what they knew. And I think that we humans also are optimized for fear of new things. Evolutionarily speaking, that made a lot of sense when we
Right.
were living in a very dangerous world, and maybe makes a little less sense now. You mentioned that people often get regular people who are like not AI aficionados often get their views of a technology like artificial intelligence through science fiction, through the news, and through influential people. And one of the things you note that I completely share your assessment of is that the news is often very negative. And so one of the things that I think that is so important about your book and your work is you don't pull punches, as we're going to get to in a minute. You have some stories in there that are pretty scary.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I love, for example, the lead story, the golden elephant,
Mhm.
really it tells the story of a Mumbai family that gets insurance, but the insurance is guided by AI. First off, I'd love your view on why is it just our human nature that if it bleeds, it leads, and that's why the news is so negative? But also, why did you mentioned H.G. Wells, right? I that type of science fiction, Star Trek, H.G. Wells was I had a positive view of the future,
Yep.
and then we seem to tip into kind of a dystopia. And by the way, I love a lot of the dystopic science fiction too because it's fun.
Sure.
But I do think that it implants ideas in our minds that makes us unduly negative.
Mhm.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think first of all, I'm a Trekkie as well. So Spock was my all-time favorite character in sci-fi genre. Um, and I always like sign on the books with live long and prosper. That's the best wish. And I think why um, right now people intended to create more dystopian stories and narratives, etc. I think most of the reason is because we all been through the huge devastation and failure in 20th century through two times of World War, and of course the collapse of Soviet Union, and all of those, seems like a utopian hallucination has failed. So I think it makes a utopian story so impossible to be plausible for the people to believe. So I think that's why we turn away from the positive future to a much more negative and bleak and dark future kind of like imagination. But I think that's why also why the news or the influential people on internet try to, um, scare people because it definitely attract more clicks, and they create this kind of anxiety, FOMO, and of course like very horror headlines. And one day I actually check out one headline. It's about like, you know uh PLA is gonna evoke a war against US. um when I click in, it's actually nothing there. It was a fake one. Totally is blank. So it's so fascinating that you will get triggered by that kind of headline, and you will intuitively you want to check in. So I think that's something deeply embedded in our human nature. So it's kind of impossible. You want to click in when people tell you, okay, you won a lottery or something, because you wouldn't, or you didn't buy it or anyways. So it's kind of like daydream of things. You just don't believe it. But when something bad people tell you it might gonna happen, you immediately you'll be attracted to it. But on the AI, I think that's definitely what I and Dr. Kai Fu Lee were discussing all the time, because we really trying so hard to create another kind of imagination of the future about AI. Because I think it's not only about the AI superpower countries. It's not even about the elites, the privileged people. It's about everyone. It's all of those ordinary people who might gonna live and suffer from this huge change of time. So I think the most important things like help people to understand what's the technology and what's behind the technology, and also like as an individual, how can we proactively engage and and leverage the technology to uplifting ourselves, like unlock the potential of the self. So I think that's what so important. Like you never want to compete with AI with all this accuracy of calculation, or collecting all the huge amount of data and do the analysis and making the decision based on it. I think that's not what humans are good at. So we have to look back in our humanity, look at the essential part of our, what's deep inside from ancient time till now. What's the real advantage of human parts? And we have to emphasize that parts, like empathy and like aesthetic sensations, and also like human communication, embodied experience, leadership, and of course your personality is also very important. So I think not a lot of parents they realize what they are teaching their kids right now is actually useless. So it's basically like back in the day when I was in school, like in China, the educational system is always emphasized. You have to remember things. You have to you have to how to say, like you have to remember all the historical events, all the dates, specific names, etc., etc. But now we know it is totally useless, right? It's like on your fingertips. You can use the search engine, or you just directly ask ChatGPT. Maybe it will give you the wrong answer, but who cares, right? So it's kind of irrelevant right now. So I think we need like a paradigm shift, not only on technology, but also on the mindset, on the consciousness. So it's even more difficult as human beings to shift their mindset, right? So I think why storytelling is so important, because it really does like changing people, how they perceive and imagine the future.
Yeah, I think that before you can make something either an aspiration or a goal, you first have to be able to conceive of it and imagine it. And I think that's why storytelling is so vital, especially at this kind of juncture of history. Your comments about education are, in my opinion, bang on. When I was, so I'm 63, and when I was a kid, having a good memory equaled being smart.
Yep.
Um, and like now, I think rather than trying to teach everyone what to think, we need to teach them how to think
Yep.
and use these tools. And I emphasize that word, tools, right? That we can use these as leverage, both for good and bad, as we're going to get into with a couple of the stories we're going to talk about. But at the end of the day, the tool itself is neutral.
Yep.
It is the human being using that tool that decides whether they're going to use it for good or for ill. But I want to jump right to one of your stories that is called Twin Sparrows, because one of the use cases that I think I'm most excited about in AI is the educational opportunities.
Totally.
Can you give a little background for people who haven't read the book of the Twin Sparrows story, and then use and how you use it to illustrate the power that AI can bring to kind of one-to-one tutoring directly to being modeled on learning from the student that they're tutoring?
Sure. Twin Sparrows is about like twin brothers. They became orphan and was put into a orphanage in Seoul, South Korea. So by then, the orphanage is kind of like is one of the kind that they are deploying very advanced technologies such as AI and digital twins, XR, to create this kind of very customized AI companions according to each kid's characters, learning curve, specialties, emotional respondents, etc., to create this very unique, individualized um, 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 teacher, partner, playmate, friends, you name it. So basically, they create an environment for each kids. So I think that could be a game changer for the future education. And because right now we all know that it's all about the inequality of resource distribution, especially on the education industry, right? Why people choose a specific location of their house, because it's close to certain schools, and their schools have resources, about the teacher, curriculums, and everything, and infrastructures for sure. But the problem is, even you get into that kind of school, get into the best class, and you have the best teacher, but somehow, like maybe there's 50 students in the one classroom, they are all different, but still they're learning the same thing. They're taking the same exam. They're having the teacher saying the same thing to them as well. So I think this is definitely uh, not equal, right? So it's not fair. And in our imagination, I think maybe in the future we can use this kind of technology to create uh, absolute customized educational experience. That means every kid had the opportunity to fully unlock their potential. So it's learning based on the human feedback, and is adjusting its curriculum and the response a model. It will change its tone, the way it speaks to you. And of course, it will use this kind of gamification basically to help you to learn something you might have interested in. And I think this is so fascinating because when you're thinking back in the time when I was in school, so I think teachers just basically they they will only look at or have all this full attention on the top students, right? Like out of maybe like top 10 students in the class, they're giving them more homeworks to do. They will even like fed them with more extra reading materials after class. That kind of things happen. And but it actually exacerbate the class, and this kind of differentiation actually will cause a lot of, I would say, uh trauma towards the kids, because they think I'm not good enough. I don't deserve this kind of uh uh uh, uh better attitude from the teacher, from the parents, or from other classmates. So I think this is totally wrong, and I think every kid deserve be treated as equally as they could. And I think, of course, this is another level. We're talking about this uh, a mobilization of a social movement. That means like you have to resisting a lot of things from the tradition of schools, teachers, and maybe the whole educational system, because we try to put everyone on the hierarchy or pyramids. That means if you are in their standards, you're smart, and you will be put on the ladder, and you climb up the ladder based on what they call scores, exam whatsoever. But I think that's not like it's not all right. It's not. I think it means a lot of like different dimensions of evaluating a human potential, right? So because maybe some kids, they're just good at playing, they're just good at storytelling, they're just good at dancing, etc., etc. But somehow I'm kind of think, especially in China, they didn't was put on the right ladder, so that means they don't have the chance to climb up the ladder. So I think AI might change that kind of future for everyone.
I agree, and I think your point about sort of the one size fits all, which was the educational standard not only in China but worldwide, is we're going from a period of mass production to mass customization. And one of the things that I'm so inspired by on the AI effects on potentially much better education for everyone, not just kids, is this idea that the AI can train on the individual that they're working with, right? And some people are visual, others are auditory. As you know,
Right.
some people have artistic skills, some people have scientific skills. And I think that this one-to-one sort of peer-to-peer approach that AI is going to be capable of is just dramatic improvement over the old style, as you put it, that reinforces, these are the top 10 kids, they're going to get all the attention. And
Yep.
of course, that's also a way that we train AIs, right, through reinforcement.
Yep.
One of the things that I thought was great about the story is even though they're twins, their outcomes are very, very different. Talk a little
Yes.
bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, like we're talking about like the twin brothers. One is gold, golden sparrow. One is silver sparrow. So they are very different characters. They have different persona and different skill set for sure. And like the brother golden sparrow is pretty outgoing, very socializing, and it was adopted by a very wealthy family, and the dad tried to push him and guide him towards the like investor, the kind of business elite, and that's following the parents' path. So I think that's totally nothing wrong. But the uh, younger brother, Silver Sparrow, was adopted by a very, I would say, eccentric artist family, which was uh, non-binary family, and it's kind of a little bit of on the spectrum of autism. So it's like kind of shut down, shut up to himself, and like maybe he's living in his own world or imagination, and but he's actually quite talented artist with all this kind of new media technology. He create a fascinating world with his skills, and I think they're going divergence in different directions, and their connection was cut off because of this, social bias and the differentiation of classes. But somehow, at certain point, they feel this urgently need to reconnect with each other, like a lineage, like something and heritage in their blood and genes, and and somehow AI make it happen. And I think that's the magic part of the story because it's a little bit off from the scientific narratives. It's a little bit mysterious and it's more, I'll say, spiritual. So think about like how these twin brothers reconnect with the help of AI. It's kind of transcendental, and it's I couldn't explain it in a scientific and technological way, but I'll say is how I imagine the future technology. It's not only about like cutting off all these connections between individuals and of course the people with the nature, but to reconnect all of those factors. So I think, but we're not 100% sure how to make it work for now. But I think that's my version of technology in the future.
Yeah, that's what I loved about the story. You were very gifted at setting up the tension, the one path with the brother in business, the other path with the brother in the arts. And yet I love how you bring in the transcendence of the human, right? So I'm a huge believer in what is being called the centaur model of AI, which is human plus AI. right?
Yes.
It's this unique combination, which will be different for every human, given their skill set, given their interests, given their talents. And I did love the way that you resolve that at the end of the story, where the AI actually brings them back together. But that's also the human part, right?
Yes.
And I love that sort of kith and kin, what's bred in the bone will out. It also makes me think of the first story, The Golden Elephant, which looks at a Mumbai family that is being sort of managed by their insurance company
Yes.
to do sort of certain things and avoid other things. And my immediate thought when I was reading that story was, so in geek speak, they call it maximizing the objective function.
Totally.
And prior maximizations of the objective function have been towards profit or revenue. But one of the things is that doesn't have to be. We can
Mhm.
maximize the objective function for creativity, for flourishing, for our artistic endeavors. But one of the things that I thought was very interesting in that story, that I want your opinion on, eh, the idea that does AI identify invisible discrimination and then sort of reinforce it?
Yes. So yeah, basically that's the whole point of the story is about think about the caste system back in the day in India. Of course, it was legally banned back in the 50s, I guess, but still it exists in a hidden structure, right? So think about large language model basically is fed up with all this data set from the language, from all this text across internet. So what they learn, what they pick up from our language is actually um, they can dig out, they can review the invisible bias, discrimination, violence within our language, even we couldn't recognize it uh, on our consciousness level. So I think that's what happened here, right? So in the society, even like a lower class, was like the discrimination was forbidden, but still the education, the career market, and the the consumption behavior, even the social interaction, all of those was heavily impacted by this kind of historical inequality. So I think all of those leftover factors were still there, but they were dig out, they were emphasized, they were enhanced by the machine, by the AI algorithm. So I think that's what basically will happen right now and in the future if we don't do something to correct the bias. So not only in Mumbai, in India, but all around the world. So basically, that's what's happening in here as well. And of course, like in the job market, like all this like resume scanning algorithm, somehow automatically they will um they will reject the female application because they know they got less chance to get through the human parts, like the recruitment process. So I think all of those bias was created by human being, by ourselves. But the problem is how we can recognize those bias and discrimination and how we can build up this hedging system to go against those negative externality. And I think this is what all of those engineers have to bear in mind because sometimes it feels to me like they only think in a very optimization way like all about objective functions, all about efficiency, all about the ROI, but they didn't really think about the human factor. So I think that's why we need more, different opinions here in the loop. We need human in the loop.
I couldn't agree more. And what you bring up, I think, is really important because if left just on its own, AI might be able to uncover a lot of hidden biases, and things that we don't consciously think about, right? And yet they're there with the examples that you give are good examples. And I think the power of the story is that you highlight this and you show, okay, look what can happen if we just approach this objectively, in quotes,
Right.
and it can end up actually intensifying these biases unintentionally. So being aware that they're there, and then it becomes incumbent upon us, as you put it, with the human in the loop, to say, "Whoa, whoa, wait a minute." Well, we certainly don't want the AI emphasizing these prejudices, which are often come from nothing, right? They come from our tribal heritage, us versus them, and vilifying and making the other evil.
Yes.
Seems like it's a big part, unfortunately, of our human evolution. And we certainly don't want this new form of evolution to emphasize those ancient enmities
Totally.
that people had for one another. And so I think that the story does a it serves as a great example of, oh, look what can go wrong. Let's see that we need to start thinking about how we set that right.
Yeah.
Another story that I was fascinated by, because in my role at Stability AI, I tried to sort of translate the tech genius to normal interested layman. And one of the things when I'm talking to people about AI that I consistently hear near the top of their concerns is the idea of deep fakes.
Yeah.
And you have a great story called Gods Behind the Masks, that concerns a deep fake of a Nigerian politician. And we learn all about GANs, which are generative adversarial networks going at one another. Um, my view is that this is something we absolutely have to address. And so much so that I'm working with my colleagues at Stability AI to create a competition where we award a large cash prize for models that are good at identifying deep fakes. But I have no illusions about this. As soon as that model comes out, the GANs will use it to create better deep fakes.
Yeah.
So this is going to be an ongoing thing. What are your thoughts about what are your thoughts about the deep fakes? The idea of the potential for narrative collapse if there's so many of these
Mhm.
fake videos, fake stories going around. What do you think?
Yeah. Like, first of all, I think the story was written back in 2020 or 2021. So back then, me and Dr. Kaifuli, we think GAN will be the major, technology in the future on deepfake. But when it gets to 2020, when I started to use stable diffusion and mid-journey, all of those things, and I thought to myself, oh, doom, they're not using GAN. They're using diffusion model, right? So it's kind of, you never predict this kind of things in a very accurate way. So I think this is what science fiction do all the time. You try to predict all the details on technology, you always make it wrong. But when you metaphorically, you want to capture the vibe, the zeitgeist of what's going on there. You always make it right because deepfake right now is the thing, and you can not only use Mid Journey to create this kind of hyper real, photo real, hallucination, but also uh, application like Runway. They can create this kind of video and even films in the future with AI. So totally, this one called Perfect Your Memories from Google is like a new feature that you can alter, you can erase, you can basically change a lot of your pictures, photos back in the day, and it feels 100% you couldn't tell, you couldn't distinguish it with the original ones with your bare eyes. So somebody might feel, some elder people might see it like, oh, is this really happened in the past, or I just remember it wrong? So this kind of confusion actually create a lot of deepfake phenomenon right now on internet or in individuals' life. So I think it's kind of scary, frightening, and yeah, so I think what you've been doing is really important because we try to do something right now. I think maybe it's not one of efforts to be made because the technology is still evolving, and people come up with even more efficient model to create this kind of deep fake contents. But I think what's what's more important is how we can persuade like the law enforcement to put it in the framework to think about how we can regulate all this kind of application for a higher level of um, uh, called institutionalization, and we have to do something, right? Like in the story, we talk about the major websites, video sites, they have to deploy this kind of like anti-deepfake detector. So that's what I think is a must in the future because there's nobody can tell. You have to either like embed some digital watermark on the content to help the system to recognize it and put a notification on the thing to help people to identify whether it's real or not. And otherwise, I think there'll be huge problem out there because people's mind are so easily be manipulated, right? So from the elections, for all this kind of huge campaigns, we can see that even by like analysis, the clicks through across Facebook, they can tell your sexual orientation. So yeah, so basically, you have so many things on internet um, can be identified, can be analysis, can be collected, can use to against yourself, right? So I think this is what we have to bear in mind. Like we have to help people to build up this kind of um, preparation, prepare for all of those um, closer enough to real, but actually it's not. So I think this is sometimes it feels like my parents, they accepting all these kind of new things even faster than I do because they know nothing about it. So they might think, okay, everyone else is using it. So what's the harm? And even the government, they didn't say anything about it. So that should be something safe, but actually it's not. So I think this is very educational, and I think we as storytellers and influencers and all of those responsible media should have all of those message like repeat and repeatedly deliver to the people. Like don't trust internet, don't trust any kind of information, even is from the government, it might be fake.
Yeah, which is like talk about the horns of a dilemma, right? And it gets us back to an innovation and a tool, right? So when we discovered fire, boy, that was good for humanity. It
Uh,
basically allowed us to cook our food and created the prefrontal cortex that we all have for reasoning and executive function. But it
yeah,
also was incredibly dangerous, and
yeah,
so, in addition to fire, then we had to invent fire departments, fire men and women, fire alarms, fire exits, all of these things.
yeah.
And these are iterative, yeah, in that, like, ooh, we didn't think about that. We better put that in place as well. So, I think that one of the things that I view as a challenge currently is you see that we've staked out what I think extreme ends of the spectrum. So on the one end of the techno optimism and utopia, like they're all saying, "Oh boy, AGI is right around the corner, and in fact, we'll have it in a year."
Yeah,
I don't happen to agree with that position,
yeah,
but so you have them over here, and then over here you have people like advocating bombing GPU plants
yes.
because of the potential, however tiny, risk that this could be an existential risk. I think that if we could try to develop more realistic conversations about the benefits, but also the problems, like the look, it tried to say that this is all going to be great is foolish, and that's your hiding your head in the sand. I think that, but also staking out these extreme positions don't help us advance this tool to the point where we could through a better and more open conversations, right, about the potentials. One of the things that I love about the book and why I recommend it so highly is you are very direct in your balance, as it were, because another story, something that, like, when I read it, it was like, "Whoa, man." And that was the story called Quantum Genocide.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I wanna emphasize for our viewers and listeners here is you are absolutely, even-handed, so to speak. You are not saying, "Oh, the future's gonna be just perfect, and AI is gonna solve all of our problems." Uh, the quantum, uh, genocide story is one in which you talk about an externality that could happen. Talk a bit about that, and then we'll maybe chat a bit about how we could solve for that.
Yeah. Content genocide is like that kind of pretty Hollywood style action blockbuster. And it's talking about a mad scientist, a quantum physicist who lost who lost his family in a mountain fire in Northern California, basically, Heaven Town. So I just, yeah, it happened before and it will happen again. It's a tragedy. And he, he kind of, uh, lost his mind and he want to take a revenge towards the world, and basically he used technologies such as AI, autonomous weapon, drones, manufacturing, the whole army of his own, and turn against all those like infrastructure and people. It's not ordinary people, but the elite people, also called the accelerationists, who believe technology will do all good to humankind. And it's kind of turned into um, a little bit like a psychoanalysis afterwards. So we gonna dig into his trauma, and we gonna see how all these things interconnect all together. and how he trying so hard to bring the whole civilization back in the time when there's no internet, there's no connectivity. So that's what he believed in, and he think cut off all of this connection might bring back the balance of human and nature. And I think this is one of the very strong um, um, uh, statement, manifesto against accelerationism. And I think, of course, it's a metaphor, but of course, you can also see the valid part of it because we're actually doing the harms because all of those emissions, because AI definitely require a huge amount of electricity, computation power, and infrastructure. And all of those will create even more carbon into the atmosphere. And of course, extraction from the nature resources. And I think this is what we have to think about it carefully. You know, otherwise it just like bring us on this even unbalancing status. It's just like you walking on the wild. It's trying to, there's so many things in your hands and you try to play it all over and all over, but somehow you just didn't realize you were walking on the wild. It's so deep, the abyss beneath. And I think one thing we've been discussed is about like the non-human part of the data, how we can make all of those other species, even the environments, will take in account when you try to build up a more in, inclusive model. It's not only on human language and imageries and everything, but also other species like animals, plants, and even fungi. So I think this is something pretty new at the very starting point, but I think this is the right direction we have to go because otherwise, I think based on the ancient Chinese philosophy, Daoism is talking about the art of doing nothing is basically the best thing to do, right? So think about pandemic when trying so hard to, lock down and control everything, but basically nothing. So of course, vaccination is so important. Scientific development on medication and detection is so important. But I mean, there's certain way we have to follow. We have to admit that we're just one of the many kinds of the species on this planet. So when you create this kind of imbalance of the world, so the nature will flip it over to rebalancing the plate. And I think, yeah, so I think this is what I try to discuss in the story is not only about the technology, but also about the attitude towards the others.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Taoism. I've been reading the Tao
Oh,
Te Ching
wonderful.
since I was 18, and I'm finally beginning to understand some of its concepts. The
Right,
the
right,
Blue
right.
Bee playing in here I is something I hadn't thought of. I'm interested to hear you refer to it. And as I was listening to you, one of the things that occurred to me is that many of these problems aren't necessarily due to the technology, but they might be really due to we humans, right?
Yes.
Because the despair that
Mhm.
the scientist goes through and then becomes this hardened desire to bring it all down, right? You see these burn it all down. You see these
Yeah.
messages. And of course, that was the manifesto of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber here in the United
Yes.
States, the Luddites before him, who went and destroyed all of the machinery because they were afraid. It does seem to me that we need to openly talk about both sides of the human character, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that we humans are essentially emotional creatures,
Yeah.
and the emotion that rules us most often is fear,
Mhm.
specifically fear of the unknown. But then it leads to things like the desire for revenge, the desire to misuse things and or blame some other thing for whatever misfortune has befallen us. And so my particular, and of course, Dune, the whole jihad against technology. That's
Yeah.
the entire Dune is. I love Dune.
Yeah.
And, so it's been dealt with both in science fiction and other stories. But again, it comes back to the power, in my mind at least, the
Mhm.
power of stories to raise these questions, right? Because one of the things that I really admire about you and your AI partner in writing this book is you are not afraid to say this could be a really big problem.
Mhm.
And if we don't start thinking about it now, we might get some ghastly surprises. Um, Kind of shifting gears to the whole job front. That's another area that I hear constantly from
Yeah.
people who are, just they're not AI aficionados, but they one of the first things after they worry about deep fakes,
Mhm.
they go to, is my job safe? And what I try to say is there are going to be a lot of jobs that will be made obsolete, made redundant by AI. That doesn't mean that. I think what one of the things that we do a bad job of is we're pretty good at saying, "Oh, well, this is going to kill X, right? This is going to kill copywriting, or this is going to kill graphic design." But
Yeah.
what we fail to do is imagine all of the jobs that will be created through
Totally.
the new technology. One of your stories, The Job Savior, is really interesting to me because you ultimately make the point that the 3 R's, relearn, recalibrate, create a renaissance where we can focus on, what we humans do instinctively well, right? Creativity, compassion, all of those types of things. But what I wanted to ask you about in the story is this idea that so I changed my mind on universal basic income.
Mhm.
Uh, I used to be opposed to it,
Mhm.
and now I'm in favor of it, knowing all of the shortcomings, right? So I don't have like a Panglossian view, like, oh, it's going to solve everything. No, it
Y
won't. It'll create additional problems, and that is one of the central topics in the story, the job savior. And the question I wanted to ask you was, do you think that it's just a fundamental part of we human, our nature, human OS, that we need a mission, so to speak. We need some form of job. And is it would it be okay to give people like jobs that weren't real jobs?
Yeah. I mean, like, as David Graeber put it, like bullshit job, right? So job basically is a social and cultural construction, in my opinion, but purpose of living is not. So I think that's deeply embedded in our human nature. So I think even all the religions is basically try to solve this problem, why we are living, why we're existing. So what's the purpose of all of those? Even like suffering from pain, isolation, etc., sacrificing. And I think people need the purpose for on doing anything. So I think in the story we came to this kind of, again, is utopic and also dystopics. It's like we try to think beyond the binary. Again, this is very Daoism, and Daoism basically is talking about all the contradictory and opposite sides is actually interchangeable, interconnected, intertwining all together. So I think, yeah, we talk about using AI to uh, recalibrate, relearn, renaissance for people to help them to uh, reallocate their job in the society. So I think is maybe in the future it's not about like how much like actual economic value you can create from your job, but it's about how this mental wellness, you know, you can gain, and also how this help you to maintain and even like uplift your living status, your human condition, and your emotional embodied experience as a human being in the family, in a society, in the community. So I think that also very important, and sometimes it's invaluable because you couldn't uh, quantify it on certain numbers. So I think that's more even trickier because people might think, okay, this job make me suffer, but I need it so badly because it pay me well. But you never can do this kind of calculation on math, because sometimes you feel like maybe you're losing a huge opportunity to discover yourself or other opportunities. Maybe you'll find your real internal like passion on actualize your dream to become a artist, a writer, or something, because you are trapped in this like well-paid job, like as a, I don't know, engineer, financier, whatsoever. But I think what's so important is how we can um, leverage this structurized dynamic change on job market because of the new technology merge, and how we can create new jobs and help people to smoothly transit to another orbit. I think that's more meaningful, right? Because people, oh, now I got a chance to do what I really want to do. So that's the whole new attitude towards this kind of change. And maybe, of course, people might suffer from this. Is like it's not perfectly um, choose emotionally solved all this kind of like pain of transition. But I think ultimately, if they really can relearn and recalibrate with themselves, not only with the external expectation, like all this, people from the outside world, you might always want to compare with them based on the social ladder and everything. But you really look into yourself and and realize that, okay, this is something really make me feel satisfied. This is really fulfill myself, and maybe it will help me to actualize myself on a higher level. So I think this is what I imagine in the future. Maybe technology such as AI can help people to find out. And I think that this is what totally transcended our whole society, our whole civilization to the next level. Because if you imagine everyone can do something they really had huge passion, enthusiasm on doing, and they must do a way better job than they're suffering as a whatsoever bullshit job. So I think this is ultimately it will like improve and uplifting the efficiency of the whole society for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point that you highlight. So many people, we have cultural lag, right? And people adopt attitudes that have persisted for a long period of time, at least in the West. My job equals me. No, your job does not equal you, right?
Yes.
And so your purpose is sometimes your job, but many times it is not your job, right?
Yes.
Your avocation and vocation can be two very different things. And I
Totally.
sort of see the idea that the tool of AI can be used to, as you put it, move us to the next level, so to speak, of evolving. But that's going to be messy and that's going to be scary. And the idea again of people contemplating it, like it scares a lot of people. But I like the idea that you know the hedonic treadmill does not have to be your fate, and
Yes.
and the opportunities that AI and other innovations are going to make for us to maybe move up Maslow's hierarchy, right? And allow more people to move up that hierarchy. You also have a story that I really loved called Isle of Happiness. Uh,
Yeah.
Happiness is such a a challenging thing to think about, I think, because my view is that happiness is a byproduct. It isn't something that can be sought directly.
Mhm.
And now we're getting into some of the more I wouldn't say esoteric ideas, but talk a little bit about the story of the Isle of Happiness, because I thought, like, my immediate thought as I was reading it was, oh man, this would be such a great movie.
Mhm. Yeah. So Arrow of Happiness is basically talking about a Russian, very successful business tycoon. He got so depressive and he tried everything he could. So have all the fun times and trying so hard not to killing himself. But he got this mysterious invitation from a Middle East country, Qatar. They built an artificial island and they try to deploy everything on this island with AI, and it try to make you happy. So basically, that's the idea. So he was like one of the few VIP guests who was got the first invitation to visit the island, and he was trapped in this kind of very drama, uh, uh, um, um, a little bit of romantic, occasions with the princess, and but somehow he was turned into a refugee, and he had to escape from out of this very scary kind of like cat and mouse chasing games, and but ultimately he, through all this kind of like gamification, he found that he regained his happiness on certain level. So it's kind of I leave it an ambiguous ending there because I want readers to have their own assumption and have their own conclusion of what is happiness really, and does AI can really help us to to persuade happiness on certain level, or just that kind of projection and illusion. So I think, yeah, it's a very subjective kind of feeling, and what is happiness, it could be like correlate to many different dimensions and factors for sure. And here we're using like biomarkers and also this kind of micro expression recognition technologies, and even like it can analysis of all the pattern of your behavior, reaction, etc., etc. Of course, on linguistic level, AI definitely can do a better job than human therapist. But all of those efforts could really lead to the result of being happier. So that's a huge question mark here, also to myself, because I know, yeah, sometimes if you're trying harder to get happy, is even push you away further from happiness. That's how I feel it. Right. So sometimes I think the simplest way is doing nothing. Just again, back to the Daoism way. And Zhuangzi put it, when you forget about everything you learn, you get the ultimate happiness because you just forget about anything like troubles you all the time. So that's what fascinated me. It's like the the furthest path may be the shortest cut. So I think that's how I understand it. It's such a very how to put it, like a very mysterious kind of thinking. Yeah. We're just losing all of those kind of ancient philosophy in China, in contemporary China. So
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah. The idea that desire is the cause of unhappiness, attachments are the
Yeah.
causes of unhappiness, is sometimes very difficult for people to grasp. And yet most of the greatest thinkers about those things have delivered pretty similar messages, that being attached to external things is not a path to happiness for most. And we kid ourselves in thinking that, if I achieve this material thing, then I will be happy.
Yeah.
I think that has been proven pretty conclusively not to be the case. And obviously, again, the fundamental nature of stories, right? Showing that, careful what you wish for,
Yeah.
because you might end up getting something that you thought you were wishing for it,
Yeah.
but maybe not. The final story that I want to talk about, dreaming of plenitude.
Mhm.
I think that I personally think that we are moving from what has dominated our species for all of our recorded history, which is scarcity. And scarcity drives zero sum behaviors. It drives all sorts of competitions that can turn deadly. And it builds the hierarchies that you referenced earlier.
Mhm.
Um, you know, what better way to maintain your position high on the hierarchy but to demonize and to somehow suggest that others are not worthy of that particular position. And, you see it encased in certain religions, you see it encased in certain world philosophies, certainly not Taoism,
Mhm.
but in many, many others. Um, what do you think about the moving into a world of an abundance, right? What 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 do we replace money with? What do we
Mhm.
replace all of those things in a world like, again, back to Star Trek, live long and prosper. Remember
Yeah.
the replicators where, I want English breakfast tea and boop, there it is. And talk a bit about the story because you come up with a very ingenious way that money gets replaced.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I want to recommend another book. It's called Economic. Is basically talking about how um all this Star Trek economy could work in the real world. So I think that was a fascinating book to read. And and in the Dreaming of Plenitude, we are talking about a post-scarcity society, which with the green energy and all this kind of social settings. We individuals, we don't need to work to make a living, basically. So you can get all this um, um, materialistic satisfaction supply from the government, but that come up with the problem we've been talking about is about the purpose of living, right? So we kind of imagine a new kind of currency, an alternative um, uh, digital currency in uh, a parallel social structure. That means this currency was attached to not the property, not to fortune, not to possessing the things, but is about like all of those um, psychological, sociological, and also spiritual demands of the hierarchy, based on Maslow's theory, is like higher level of the uh, demands like belonging and dignity and maybe love and also contribution to the community, self-actualization, and maybe ultimately there'll be transcendence of yourself, right? But that's the highest hierarchy of all. Like it's almost like religious to me, and this kind of like currency actually is gonna incentive people and mobilize people to pursue what they really want to do. So for a very uh, conscious level and spiritual level, and of course they can, with this currency they can basically trade with a lot of opportunity to fulfill themselves, to again like re-educate themselves and to self-actualize. And I think this is something, it's quite idealistic, to be honest. I don't think this is would be happen in the near future, foreseeable future. And of course, I put it in Australia, Brisbane, because they have abundant of clean energy. But when I talk to my friends from Australia, none of them believe in this story because they all told me like, no, the government sucks. There's no way it could happen in Australia. So it's so funny to remind me the external, imagination is so various with the insiders like perspective, right? When people living in the society, people really feel the thing, people can see all those frustration and failure from the others or maybe from themselves. So this is, I think this story reminds us the solution might not always only about the technology, but also beyond the technology. It's about the social construction. It's about the political system. It's about the redistribution mechanism. So it's how we design everything we running the world. So, but all of those was built upon our belief, our our consensus, right? Our value system. So those foundation are even more difficult to be challenged, to be changed, because all of the story of capitalism have been told like in the past centuries. And all of those challenges had failed, right? So we didn't come up with anything new, anything revolutionary. And I think this is what we lack of here. As storyteller, I always think that we imagine so many fascinating technologies, inventions, etc., other species. But why couldn't we come up with some new social system, some new political system that might really can inspire people to make the change. So I think we urgently need some voices here, right? From economists and from maybe like sociologists and anthropologists. So give us something new, maybe from the nature, maybe from, I don't know, mathematics, maybe can help us to get rid of this old trap. You know, that's what we need. New narratives, new metaphor, new myth, maybe.
Yeah. And I think, again, that's why I love your book so much and why I recommend it to so many people who are interested in AI, but also in how we present and think about all of these things. Because I personally am very optimistic in a rational sense. I by that I mean I understand that there will be tons of problems, and that we're going to have to come up with solutions for those problems. But I like the aspirational nature of your book and your closing story, in that you've got to put those ideas out there for people to even begin contemplating them.
Yeah.
And I think that I personally feel like I'm the luckiest person on the planet that I get to be alive during this time, uh,
Hmm.
because, like, wow, we now are in a position to do so many interesting and evolving as a species things.
Yeah.
But of course, we can also go the other way,
Hmm.
and we can use these innovations and these very powerful technologies in a very destructive way.
Hmm.
And so, thus my desire to highlight people and great storytellers like yourself and others, because that's how people seem to really get their minds switched on.
Hmm.
And one of the things we've been working on is, the Netflix show Black Mirror. We held a competition called White Mirror, and we
Ah.
actually the author who won is actually coming out with a huge series of inspiring stories for what we can hopefully achieve with these new innovations and technologies. Um, Listen, I love your book. I loved having this opportunity to chat with you about it. Um, what's next for you? What are you working on right now?
Yeah, I'm the research scholar at Macmillan Center at Yale this year. So I'm also working on my next novel. It's um the sequel to Waste Time, my debut novel. So it's talking about climate change in an oceanic scenario, and also it's about like human machine nature triangle, like how to make it works, like from an intelligence level. But I mean, in the previous 6 months, so many things happened, like all this ChatGPT thing. It actually um it actually knocking us off. Like you have to rethink about how you describe and imagine the future of AI, basically. So that's what I've been struggling a lot recently, because you have to come up with something beyond, what's the narrative right now. That's like you have to like one step or two step forwards from the reality. That's how we think it might be science fiction, sci-fi enough, or futuristic enough. So I think, yeah, that's what so fascinating, because our imagination was already left behind from reality. Is so fast, it's evolving like on daily basis, and we have to trying so hard to catch up with it. And I think that's what you put it, like we're very lucky to living in this time, right? The time of change. All I can experience, maybe I think even like I will not be surprised if I can see the end of humanity. And I think that's could be something of as a science fiction writer, that could be really um you know, it's very complicated feelings here. I first of all, I would say this is could be a very apocalyptic world to be seen, but also you might feel that, oh, maybe there's something new, something novel emerge from all these ashes of the old world, and that could be amazing. And and I couldn't wait to see that so happening. And yeah, I'm totally amazed.
Amazing. And of course, the apocalyptic vision, they always joke that prostitution is the world's oldest profession.
Yeah.
No, I think forecasting the end of humanity and the world is the world's oldest profession.
Yes.
So we certainly have a long history of people telling us that the end is nigh. And so far, we have not succumbed to that particular outcome. One of the things that we do with all of our guests at the end is we tell you that we're going to wave a wand and make you the emperor of the world for one day, and you can't put anyone in a re-education camp or you can't kill anybody. But what you can do is we're going to give you a magic microphone, and you can speak two things into that microphone that everyone in their morning, wherever their morning is on the planet, all 8 billion people are going to wake up and they're going to think that the two things that you suggested or incepted in them were their own ideas, and they're going to immediately start acting on them.
Oh wow.
What two things are you going to incept?
Wow, that's very cool. That's wow. I have to be very cautious about this wish, you know. I would say first, like doing at least one positive good thing to the others, no matter that's human or other species today. And two, um, reflecting on the thing you did yesterday and make progress.
Oh, I love that. I love that. You inserted a loop.
Yes.
And it
Infinite
is
loop.
an infinite loop.
Yes.
Well,
Please.
listen, thank you so much. I'm a
Thank
huge
you, Jim.
admirer of your work. And can't wait to see what comes from you next.
Thank you so much. A
Cheers.
lot of fun.